Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/Maliciouscompliance, where you always have to be careful what you wish for. And our first story. Reimburse me or the police will get involved. Okay then, let's get the police involved. So I work in customer support for a mobile network provider. The way our company works is that after training, you enter a 1-month testing period where you answer phone calls under close supervision. At the end of the testing period, they either let you go or transfer you to a permanent position on one of the teams. I was a few days away from the end of the testing period when I get one heck of a phone call. I spent more than an hour on that one. It hurt my final score at the end of the month. The customer told a tall tale about how when she was trying to pay her debt to the company, she racked hundreds of shekels worth of debt in unincluded uses. The sales representative was rude to her and refused to let her pay, so she took a picture of him and left. The reason the call took so long is because she kept telling the story out of order, adding and changing details and going on tangents and rants. It was very difficult to get the story straight. I felt like a detective trying to piece together the clues into what actually happened. Every time I read the story back to her chronologically, she added or changed something in the middle or went on a tangent about how she's a very polite British woman and we shouldn't hire people like that representative to represent our company. Eventually, I got her to settle down on a version of what happened. I looked through the records and saw that according to the representative, who was a lot more concise than her, she was the one being rude, yelling at him in English, a language he barely spoke, and taking his picture without his consent. I didn't tell her that, I just politely instructed her on how to pay her debt via the phone. She sounded nervous. I told her that until the debt is paid, I cannot make the changes in the account, including adding a report. So reluctantly, she gave me her credit card details and the debt was paid in full. I reported on what she told me and moved it along to my superiors. A few days later, my testing period was over, and despite that tragedy of a call, I aced it and got transferred to the illustrious email department, which is what I wanted. It's much more chill here, and I can work at my own pace, not having to rely on the customer or the supervisor to work faster. Also, I could take my breaks whenever I felt like it. Everything's fine for a couple weeks until I receive a new email telling a familiar tale. It was an enraged recounting of the same story I heard on the phone, except much more elaborate, with more details I never heard before, such as the involvement of another person, or that the representative assaulted the customer by trying to impede her exit from the store. The customer complained that she's been cheated and expected the representative to be fired, but she saw him again at the store and was outraged. She was under the impression that her paying her debt meant we will listen to her and fire the representative. The email ends with the following demands: fire the representative, reimburse her for the money we stole from her under false pretenses, apologize to her in the form of extra compensation and a personal phone call from a high-ranking manager. If we did not comply, the police will get involved. So I complied with the second part, and we got the police involved. You see, while reading the email, I noticed that the address she emailed us from had a different surname than her account or the credit card information she provided. And lo and behold, the email was actually her real name, while the other details were fake. Turns out she was indeed a polite British woman, a British woman overstaying her visa for over a year that was now using a fake identity in Israel. How's that for false pretenses, B? As we discovered later, she was also wanted for numerous accounts of fraud where she just didn't pay for services or claimed compensation for stories that later turned out to be false, just like she tried to do with us. We called the police, but they couldn't find her since the physical address she registered on our site was also fake. So we called her back to the store to apologize personally. She gladly obliged. The police were waiting for her. Neither I nor the representative she implicated were there that day, unfortunately, so we didn't get to see the look on her face. She was fined a hefty amount and then deported back to the UK. Music teacher gets mad at me for not being able to hear her. I'm deaf. So this happened a couple years ago when I was fresh at high school in year 7. I was in the grade for 11-year-olds for international peeps. One important thing to note with me is that I'm profoundly deaf in both ears and cannot hear a single thing without the use of my cochlear implants, CI. However, I can lip read pretty accurately, so I'm not completely lost without them. Another thing to note is that my CI run on batteries, and these need to be replaced every 2 days. This will be important later on. Most of the teachers were pretty understanding about this and would often go out of their way to make sure I could hear clearly what they were saying, such as seating me towards the front of class and standing directly in front of me when addressing the whole class. Except for one teacher, who was a real hard ass about it. She also happened to be a music teacher. She'll be known as Miss O. Also, this is probably the worst combo because music is also my weakest subject for obvious reasons. Enter malicious compliance. Me and my form, we're a pretentious school and like to call the class that we register and go to lessons with our form, are off to our music lesson. And this happens to be a double period. Yes, we're pretentious, and period means lesson, which is about 1 hour and 30 minutes long. Anyway, we start the lesson, and pretty much 2 minutes after we sit down, the batteries in my CI had run flat. Remember how I told you earlier they go flat every 2 days? So I needed to change them. However, as my bag, which had my batteries in it, was in the room next door, I decided to raise my hand, like an obedient little boy, and ask if I can go and grab my batteries. At this point, I could still lip read and understand what the teacher was saying, but I'd much rather be able to hear, LOL. Anyway, she pretty much ignores the fact that my hand is up, and after a couple of minutes, I pretty much get the hint that she doesn't want to answer my question. I thought, whatever, I can still lip read and understand most of what she's saying. So Miss L basically asked the whole class to go on the computers, listen to an audio file she'd sent us via email, and then use that as inspiration to digitally create our own piece of music. She also wanted us to show it to the class at the end of the lesson. Now, because I didn't want to get in trouble, I raised my hand again to try and ask if I can get the batteries from my bag, but she ignores me again. So I'm like, what? I don't even like music anyway, so no big deal. As a result, I pretty much sit in front of the computer screen doing nothing as I can't hear the audio file or make any somewhat decent piece of music. Remember, this is a double period, so a pretty long wait. After 5 minutes, I get bored and decide to start talking to my friends. Did I mention I can lip read? And basically let them in on the joke, and we're all trying our hardest not to laugh too hard. Pretty soon word gets around the class, and now they can't wait until the end of the lesson to see what Miss L is going to do. End of the lesson rolls around, and when it's my turn to play my piece of music, I pretty much sit in silence and the whole class starts laughing, but trying to stifle it at the same time. This is how the conversation goes between me and her at that point. Miss L: "Can you not hear me? I asked you to play your piece of music." Ironic, I know, right? Me sits in silence and the laughter is getting louder. Miss L: "Are you even listening to me? Are you trying to disrespect me by not listening to anything I say?" Me: "Well?" Miss L: "Honestly, just play your piece of music. It's not that hard." Me, trying to stifle my laughter at this point, I can't. Miss L cuts me off. "This is how you treat your teachers? Get out of class right now." So I get out and pretty much wait there until the lesson is over. I think she was expecting an apology from me, which was never going to happen, because after a couple of minutes, she pops her head out of the door and barks at me. "You have absolutely no respect for your teachers. Meet me at the City View at lunchtime." So I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. At lunchtime, I meet her at the principal's office, like she said. Another important thing is that I'm pretty friendly with the headmaster. She opens the door and the conversation is as follows. "Miss L, this guy was giving me attitude during my lesson and wouldn't listen to me. I would give him a Friday after-school detention, but I feel he deserves to get a Saturday detention." Headmaster turns to me. "What happened?" Me: "Well, my batteries for my CI died, and I raised my hand to ask if I could go get the replacement batteries from my bag, but she proceeded to ignore me." Miss L: "Looks like she just had an epiphany." Headmaster: "Well, are you sure about this? Because he has no prior record of being disobedient." Miss L, looking a bit flabbergasted: "Yes, I'm absolutely sure he was disrespecting me." Me: "Sir, you know that I'm deaf and that I would never on purpose do that to a teacher." Headmaster: "Well, I'm inclined to believe the student here. If you have no proof otherwise, there's nothing to discuss." Miss L then goes extremely red as she realizes her mistake and storms out of the office. The headmaster gave me a slight smile before ushering me out of the office as well. Ever since then, she's never ignored me whenever I've had my hand up. If you enjoyed the stories, slap the like and subscribe buttons for more of them. Thanks for listening and see you soon.